The desert was cold in the hour before sunrise, the kind of cold that bit through wool and leather and bone. Frost clung to the hull of the Panzer Roman III like a thin white skin. Wind scuttled across the sand like skeletal fingers dragging themselves toward dawn. Hans Weber stood watch beside the burnt-out remains of an Italian supply truck, rifle slung across his shoulder, breath fogging the air as he waited for the horizon to bleed with light. He could hear the quiet grumbling of his comrades behind him. Boots shifting, canteens rattling, cigarettes being lit with cupped hands to hide the glow. It was December 1942, Tunisia. Africa Corps territory, or so they were told. Rommel's men still moved west, though slower now, pushed by the tightening Allies. The British they knew, the French they understood. But today there were rumors, fresh ones, whispers, that the Americans were here. Not just infantry, not just green boys with new weapons and big supplies. Marines, U.S. Marines, devils in immaculate uniforms. Hard training, ruthless discipline. Many Germans brushed off the stories as exaggerated tales to scare frightened rookies. Hans had brushed them off too until last night. Scouts had returned, pale and tight, jawed, speaking fast, stumbling on words like they were drunk. They fought like animals, one scout said, too breathless to sit, eyes wide as if he had escaped something ancient. They don't run from machine gun fire, they run toward it. Another claimed their rifles bucked like artillery, their grenades filled the air with metal. None of it sounded real, yet every man here stood a bit straighter now. Anxiety wafted like the smoke of their cigarettes. Every ear strained for sound. Hans flexed his cold fingers and tried not to think. He was 20, 3 years old. Joined the Wehrmacht in 39. Fought the French near Sedan. Fought the British near Tobruk. Lost friends. Gained scars. Grew older than his years. But despite it all, he lived. Survival made him proud. He thought he'd seen everything war had to offer. Then he saw movement. A column of dust spiraled up in the far distance, silhouettes shifting behind it. At first just shadows, then shapes helmeted, broad, shouldered, moving with purpose across the sand. Not in scattered lines like conscripts, not in nervous clusters like Italians. These men moved with the rhythm of a drill they repeated 1,000 times. Amerikaner, muttered Otto beside him, square jaw, burnt skin, veteran of Greece. His voice held awe and something almost like fear. Hans raised his binoculars. The figures came into focus, helm, its dipped low, packs strapped tight, M1 rifles held snug across chests. Marines, sun glinted off metal like sharp white teeth. There was no hesitation in their stride, no turning back. They came forward as though the desert belonged to them. Hans lowered the glasses, his heart thumped. Everything the scouts said suddenly felt too small. These men were not rumor, they were reality. Behind him, Feldwebel Kraus barked orders. Machine gun crews scrambled, ammo belts draped across shoulders like deadly scarves. Riflemen dug deeper into their foxholes. Panzer crews climbed inside steel coffins that roared to life, exhaust swirling black and thick. Hans took his position behind a stack of sandbags. The trigger of his car 98K felt colder than before. The first gunshot cracked across the valley like a whip. Then another, then the desert exploded. Marines dropped to the ground but did not break. They crawled forward, returning fire in tight, lethal bursts. Their mortars hissed overhead, shells landing with thunderous bursts that punched sand into the sky like geysers. German machine guns lit up, tracers ripping red lines across the dunes. Men shouted, curses blending with screams. The air tasted like metal and smoke. Hans fired at a shape rushing through dust. The recoil slammed into his shoulder. The figure stumbled but did not fall. That alone rattled him. He fired again. This time the Marine dropped, but another took his place immediately. No hesitation, no slowing. Cy Grafen, whiter, and Otto shouted, "They keep attacking." It was unreal. British commandos fought fiercely, but they retreated when pinned. French colonial troops sometimes broke quickly, but these Americans surged forward as if the fire itself led them. One Marine raised himself to sprint. Hans watched through the gun sight, the man's expression invisible behind shadow and sand. Yet Hans felt his determination as clearly as wind. Hans fired. The Marine fell, rolled, kept crawling, rifle still clutched in his hands. Hans whispered to himself, "Why Teufel, like devils, grenades rained down, German foxholes erupting in fire." Shrapnel sang through the air like angry bees. Someone screamed near Hans, a young Bavarian named Lucas, barely 18, now clutching his face as blood poured between fingers. Otto dragged Lucas to cover, shouting for the medic. Hans fired again and again, hands trembling but refusing to stop. Marines were inside 200 meters now. He could see their faces, jaw clenched, teeth grit, eyes burning with resolve. One German machine gun jammed. The crew scrambled to fix it. A Marine squad saw the hesitation and charged. Kraus bellowed orders. Hans and others fired desperately, but the Marines closed fast. In seconds they were among the sandbags. A German soldier stood too slow and was cut down by a burst of .45 from a Thompson. Another swung his rifle as a club, cracking jawbone, before being tackled into the dirt. Fists hammered helmets, knives flashed, men grappled like animals. Hans bayoneted one Marine, but the man seized Hans's collar and dragged him down even as he bled. Sand filled Hans's mouth. The two rolled. The Marine swung his rifle butt. Hans's vision flashed white. He stabbed again, deeper. The Marine shuddered, fell limp, eyes staring at sun he could no longer see. Hans crawled back, chest heaving. He heard Germans shouting, some orders, some pleas for stretcher-bearers. The Marines had not taken the first line, but God, they had nearly broken it. After an hour, the attack slowed. Marines retreated not in panic, but like wolves stepping back to evaluate prey. They left their dead, but only after retrieving every wounded man who still drew breath. Hans watched them carry comrades through machine gun fire, risking death for a single man. Otto joined Hans on the ridge, sweat streaking dirt on his face. His helmet was dented. He spat blood. "They fight like demonen," he muttered. "No." Hans replied softly, "They fight like men who refuse to die." Around noon, the desert sweltered. Dead bodies swelled in the heat. Flies gathered like a plague. German positions sagged, ammunition low, water lower. Yet before any soldier could fully catch his breath, the horizon trembled again. They were coming back. Kraus swore, voice cracking. Hans checked his rifle. His hand shook, but there was steel beneath the fear now. They had held once. They would hold again. Marines advanced with tanks, this time Shermans rolling like thunder, treads grinding over stone. Their hull guns spat fire. A German Parquet 38 fired back, the shell slamming into a Sherman's side. The tank burst in flame, hatch flying open. Marines spilled out burning, screaming. Hans's stomach lurched, but they kept advancing. Another Sherman, then two more. The American line surged, a second attack, more brutal than the first. Marines fanned out, using terrain as if instinct carved maps into their skulls. German mortars tried to break them, but the Americans returned fire with eerie accuracy, spotters calling coordinates with fast confidence. Shells walked up German positions step by step. Foxholes crumpled. Men vanished under sand and smoke. Hans fired until his shoulder numbed. He saw Otto hurl a grenade, saw 2 Marines fall and others keep running. He heard Kraus shout orders until his voice was lost in explosions. He saw Lucas's empty foxhole and knew the boy would never see home again. Then the Americans reached the wire. A Marine with BAR support leapt forward, cutting through barbed coils with pliers while bullets whipped past. Germans targeted him, the most dangerous man on the field, and still he worked. When the wire parted, Marines flooded through like unleashed fury. Close quarters again. Hans stabbed 1 Marine in the ribs. Another knocked him down with a rifle butt. Sand and sweat stung his eyes. He grappled, teeth gritted, legs kicking. The Marine punched him twice, heavy like stone. Hans rolled, reached for his pistol. The Marine seized his wrist. They struggled, fingers digging into flesh. A German private shot the Marine from behind. The man fell slack. Hans gasped air like it was life itself. He looked down at the dead American's face, young, freckles, jaw clenched even in death. Hans whispered, voice hollow, "Why do you fight like this?" The answer came not from the corpse, but from another Marine who shouted across battle, voice sharp as a blade even through chaos. For each other. Hans froze for half a heartbeat, then fought harder. Hours dragged, the sun burned. The ground soaked with blood. Neither side yielded easily. Germans had better positions, heavier machine guns, desert experience. The Marines had raw fire, relentless grit, unbreakable brotherhood. By late afternoon, the field went quiet, not victory quiet, but exhausted quiet. Smoke rose in long gray pillars. Half the battalion lay wounded or dead. Germans held the ridge barely. Marines retreated again, not defeated, just waiting. Night fell cold. Stars scattered across sky like shrapnel, frozen in space. Hans sat beside a truck tire, bandaging a cut along his temple. Otto leaned back against a box of shell casings, staring into darkness. They are not like the others. Otto whispered, no fear of death, no hesitation. Hans nodded slowly. They fight as if pain means nothing, as if dying is acceptable, so long as they drag us with them. Otto gave a grim chuckle. Tomorrow will be worse. They learned today how we defend. And we learned how they attack. Hans replied. Neither lesson is gentle. Rain of artillery woke them before dawn. American shells pounded the ridge, shaking earth like drums of doom. Men ran to positions, stumbling half-ass. Leap. Hans grabbed his rifle, heart racing. Marines charged in smoke, silhouettes blinking in artillery light. This time they had flamethrowers. German machine gun nests went silent under firestorms of liquid flame. Screams curdled the air. Hans fired until he tasted gunpowder in his teeth. Marines surged up the ridge. One appeared beside him, knife raised. Hans blocked with his rifle, kicked the man in the knee, drove bayonet forward. The Marine fell, but another took his place instantly. How many were there? The ridge began to buckle. Kraus rallied men, face blackened with smoke. No retreat. He roared, but he fought with desperation, not confidence. The line was breaking. Hans saw it like a crack through stone. Slow, inevitable, final. Then a whistle sounded. German mortars unleashed hell, shells slamming down the slope where Marines pressed hardest. Americans scattered. Tanks shifted back. Hans and remaining riflemen countercharged in a burst of adrenaline. Bayonets met flesh. Boots crushed helmets. Screams blurred into one long roar, and suddenly, shockingly, the Marines withdrew again. Not because they broke, Hans realized, because they saw opportunity tomorrow instead of death today. Their discipline was terrifying. Their retreat was orderly. They dragged every wounded man, even under fire. German soldiers whispered in awe, rifles limp in trembling hands. By noon, the battlefield stilled. Bodies lay everywhere, American and German, tangled in wire, curled in shell craters half, buried in sand. Buzzards circled overhead. Smoke drifted in lazy swirls. Hans limped between foxholes, past corpses, stepping carefully as if the dead might speak. Some Marines died clutching rifles, knuckles white even in death. Others died with hands reaching toward fallen comrades. Hans paused beside a young American, face soft, print of a sweetheart's photo tucked in chest pocket. He knelt, head bowed. Otto joined him, voice low. "We face something new, Hans." "Yes," Hans replied. "We face soldiers who fight like us." Otto looked out across the desert, where Marines regrouped just beyond horizon, fresh supply lines behind them, determination thick as blood. "Tomorrow they attack again," he said. Hans nodded, finger tracing stock of rifle, "and we will answer." That night, German soldiers sat in cold dark, sharing water, rationed drop by drop, speaking quietly of what they saw. They did not boast, they did not laugh. They looked into fire and whispered things they once believed impossible. "They aren't just brave," one soldier murmured. "They are unstoppable, bulletproof," another said. "Even wounded, they keep coming." "Marines," Otto said, spitting sand, shaking his head with something like respect. If the whole American army fought like them, this war would already be over. Hans listened, silent, eyes reflecting flame. He thought of the Marine who kept crawling after being shot twice. He thought of men charging machine, guns with nothing but courage and a rifle. He thought of how every wounded Marine was carried by brothers who refused to abandon him. And when he spoke, the others listened. "They do not fight for generals," Hans said quietly. "They fight for the man beside them, for the one who fell, for the one who might fall next. No order compels them, loyalty does. A loyalty we must match, or we will die here." No one argued. Wind carried their words into night, into darkness where Marines planned their next assault. Above them, stars gleamed cold and merciless, as if war were only a story Earth told to itself beneath indifferent sky. Morning came like judgment. The final attack started with no warning, just a wall of sound, mortars, Sherman barrels flashing, machine gun chatter, so constant it sounded like rain. German positions cracked. Men who survived last assault now fell within seconds. Hans's squad shrank from 14 to 6. Marines advanced not in a line, but in interlocking squads, covering each other with precision. Flames roared from tanks, burning trenches like fire pits of hell. Machine gun nests silenced one by one. Hans fought without thinking. Reload, fire, duck, look for muzzle flash. Sand kicked up by bullets kissed his cheeks like angry bees. A Marine charged his left flank. Hans shot once. The man fell but rolled behind a rock, returning fire. Hans ducked as bullets snapped overhead. Otto threw 2 grenades. One exploded short, one perfect. The Marine disappeared behind a curtain of sand. But for each Marine they killed, 3 took his place. The Germans fell back to second line. A sergeant screamed orders until shrapnel tore him apart. A medic crawled through fire, only to be cut down 50 meters short of his patient. Hans saw a young Marine sprint through open ground, bullets ripping sand at his feet, until he dove into a crater and fired back with deadly calm. It was madness. It was beauty twisted into violence. It was war at its purest two forces, unwilling to break, even as bodies fell like rain. Then a German radio operator yelled reinforcements, armor approaching from the north. Panzers rolled in, engines roaring. Their arrival ignited German spirits like fuel on flame. The Marines pause, not in fear, but recalculation. Hans watched as they shifted formations in seconds, adjusting strategy like seasoned predators. The battle turned brutal. Panzers clashed with Shermans, shells slamming metal, fire erupting skyward. One Sherman pierced through, turret spinning, firing twice. A Panzer exploded, hatch blown off as crew fled burning. Another Panzer returned fire, Sherman flank tearing open like tin. Infantry clashed in dunes. Bayonets met blades, fists met sand. Rifles became clubs when ammo ran dry. Blood soaked into earth that once knew only sun and wind. Hans stumbled into a shell crater. Inside lay a wounded Marine, thigh torn open, face pale but eyes steady. The man aimed a pistol, but hands trembled too weakly to fire. Hans could kill him, end one more enemy. The Marine whispered through clenched teeth, "Do it fast." Hans hesitated, rifle raised. The American didn't beg, didn't curse, just stared, waiting with unflinching dignity. Hans lowered his rifle. He lifted the Marine over his shoulder and carried him toward the German line to treat him. Bullets whipped past, shells shook ground, but he kept walking. Otto saw him and blinked as if seeing madness. Hans ignored him. He laid the Marine beside a German medic who stared incredulously. "He fought with honor," Hans said. "He deserves a chance." Word spread like wildfire. Hans Weber spared an enemy Marine. Some Germans scoffed. Others fell silent. Many looked toward the horizon where Marines continued fighting and felt something new, something unfamiliar respect. By sunset, the battle ended not with victory, but exhaustion. Both sides held ground, both buried dead. No one cheered. No one felt triumph. The desert claimed countless suns that day, and would claim more tomorrow. As twilight bled across dunes, Hans stood beside Otto, watching stretcher teams retrieve fallen. Americans carried theirs with equal devotion. Even in defeat or stalemate, Marines treated the battlefield like sacred ground, never leaving a brother behind. Otto exhaled long, weary. "Tell me, Hans, after today, after all we saw, what do Germans say now when they fight you?" Marines, Hans answered with heavy certainty. "We say they are the toughest bastards we have ever faced. Men who run toward fire, not from it. Men who would rather die than abandon each other." Marine. He paused, eyes fixed on distant silhouettes retreating into gathering night. "And God help any army that underestimates them